Hey, listen up. Yeah, we here and we locked in. Let's keep it going all the way to the top 10. We fear the turtles, so it's no other option. Fred and Ryan, just watch them. Let's take it to the max. It's the shell and tell. They come with all the facts. It's the shell and tell. Let's take it to the max. It's the shell and tell. They come with all the facts. It's the shell and tell.
Well, we talked about it. I'm the happiest idiot in town. Welcome back to the next episode of Shell and Tell. You finally broke me. You finally broke the homer and got me to predict against the home squad. And you brought me right back in, Locks. Dang it, you brought me right back in.
Yeah, monumental win, obviously, with the USC game pegged as the big game of the season. Maryland secured their biggest fourth quarter comeback since 2020 to take down the Trojans for a much needed win and a momentum building win.
Yeah, I mean, this was just like a storybook win in like the weirdest way, like in the Hollywood twists and turns. We're going to set you up for failure and then set you up for glory over and over again. It was just kind of insane. I was literally receiving a text from Brendan, one of our all-time listeners here on Shell and Tell, during the interception that kind of turned the game around with Scruggs, the INT. I look down, I read the interception, or the text message, just like, man, I can't do this anymore. I can't give them all my weekends. And like, as I look up from that text message, the ball is intercepted right in front of me.
Yeah.
It's like, was literally the low point in like Maryland fandom and snapped right back in.
I think Maryland, they actually shared a clip of it on Instagram. I think it's on social media now, on Twitter, excuse me. But it was kind of Azar just kind of talking to the DBs saying like, we need one of y'all to make a play. We haven't come down with the interception in 2 weeks. Why not one of y'all? And you know, when you kind of talked about that interception, I mean, I tweeted it from the Inside the Black and Gold account, but I mean, it's exactly what it was. I mean, USC was was purging Maryland territory. So I mean, you know, already facing a 2-possession game. Scruggs came down with a big interception, big game from him in the absence, with Dante Trader being sidelined as well. And then obviously one play after the interception, Edwards to Ty Felton on the 18-yard slant, which you know, got a little bit of extra push there from some of his teammates to get his way into the end zone. But just a complete momentum shifting game or play to ultimately swing the game for Maryland's favor.
Yeah, obviously you said Ty got some help from his friends. Well, Scruggs also got some help from his friends on that interception. Our boy Ruben Hippolyte came completely unblocked and had an unbelievable amount of pressure on that quarterback's face, changing that throw to give it a, yeah, you know, no interception's easy, especially with the pressure on, but a much worse throw than you had seen that quarterback play that game. Big credit to Ruben, big credit to Scruggs. That really was a game-changing moment. We had plenty of other times where it seemed like we squandered it after that fact, that we weren't going to be able to use that to win the game. So it wasn't like it was all roses after that moment, but clearly in hindsight, that was the moment the team needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you hit the nail right on the head there. And I thought Ruben, he looked good to finish with a tied for the team high 7 tackles. Also thought Donnell Brown did a really good job generating pressure off the edge. Quayshawn Fuller also flashed a lot. And I think it was really, you know, this USC offense, you know, obviously the passing potential and the big play potential there with Miller Moss, who started out the game. I think at one point he was 19 of 25 passing. But so he did a good job, but, you know, containing Woody Marks, who's a big play threat, one of the, you know, top playmakers, I think, in the conference. Thought this front seven really kind of lived up to the billing to kind of contain him. I believe he averaged, about 5 yards to carry. But I think, you know, Maryland did a good job kind of eliminating a lot of the big chunk plays and kind of did a good job wrapping up when contact was made.
Yeah, I mean, the defense on average did a pretty good job. We had our normal Maryland problems that we still have not cleaned up. Of course, better result. So, you know, we can learn from problems when you have a good result. Cool. But the first half ended up being, you know, a 21-7 or whatever it was at the end of the first half. Yep. But really, they only earned 7 of those. We literally gifted them 14 points. The first one was on the dumb penalty, somebody wandering onto field goal block late on a missed field goal. They end up converting the 4th down and scoring 7. So it's literally a 7-point penalty for just, like what Locke says, one of those non-competitive penalties, the ones that can't happen, like that between the whistles.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you hit right on the head there. I mean, just kind of have with the way the game kind of went, and frankly, the last 4 or 5 weeks, it just kind of felt like once you got that stop and then you give up, really an unforced penalty like that gives USC another chance. And 2 plays later, they found the end zone right there to kick off the game, scoring. So it kind of felt a little bit deflating. Obviously it was the final play of the first quarter there, so a couple people texted me, obviously, not positive reactions, of course. And midway through the game, you had a lot of the fans, the Fire Loxley fans, and that commentary, whatnot. But felt like obviously that fourth quarter they were able to pull it together. But again, that first quarter, I thought for the most part they were able to. The defense was able to kind of live up to the billing. But USC, I mean, they made it clear they were going to attack Maryland through the air. 125 yards through the air in that first quarter. But I thought the defense did a good job. I think it was Glenn Miller who had that first pass breakup right before that fourth down penalty, mind you. He had that Glenn Miller had that downfield pass breakup, and then I think Kevis Thomas, I believe it was in the early couple minutes of the second quarter, he had that pass breakup as well on third down. So secondary, they did have their moments in the first half of the season where they've shown the young secondaries kind of shown the ability to kind of give up the big play sometimes.
Yeah, the young secondary is definitely growing, and we've said that's
Yeah.
been one of our problems is the young offensive line, which we honestly didn't and maybe still don't believe can grow in season because that's just offensive linemen take time. They just takes getting bigger, it takes getting older, it takes getting stronger in order to really develop to a Big Ten offensive line. The corners, they can develop a little faster, and they're showing that. We brought in some very high talented players over the years. We have had freshmen and like nearly freshmen, redshirt freshmen starting in those areas. So if you bring in with a lot of talent, it doesn't take quite as much of a learning curve to get up to speed. Hopefully we're seeing that. Hopefully that continues throughout the rest of the year and makes a couple of these wins that we were not really thinking could happen right back on the table, because that's what this win does. Is it you look at what USC has played. They've played a lot of our remaining schedule. They've played them very tight. They've had them in overtime, both of Minnesota and Penn State. So like it puts games back on the table that people didn't think were there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talked about, Maryland's next opponent, Minnesota, kind of similar games. USC entered the fourth quarter ahead. Minnesota found a way to claw back at home to pull that off, and similar to Maryland. So yeah, USC. I mean, I think on their end, this is the third collapse in the second half that you've seen really in the last 4 or 5 weeks under Lincoln Riley. When you throw in the Penn State game just really the week before, so I think that's probably its own set of conversations. And Lincoln Riley, unless things change, probably enters next season as number one on the hot seat list across the country. But yeah, again, for Maryland, you talked about momentum building. Obviously, we were a couple minutes late recording for the show, and I think it was trending that way regardless. But Elijah and Isaiah Hammond, both those guys, we'll talk about them later, but both those guys, were in attendance, made their way onto the field, and announced their decision to suit up for Maryland today. Carter Meadows, he was a 4-star from Gonzaga, getting a lot of these guys. Zion Ely, 5-star from St. Francis. Emmanuel Inacho from 5-star tackle from Georgetown Prep. Ely and Inacho, for both those top 10 talents from the 2026 class right in their backyard there. So, again, for Maryland to really get back on track, get this win, get the win in the game that, again, fans, everyone had this circled. Get the win in front of this long list of recruits that you're trying to build on and continuing to build on. And Loxley, you talked about the secondary kind of needing to grow up, and they can grow up a little bit faster. Loxley said it, post game in the locker room, and he said it post game in the media with the press conference. This is one of those games where you kind of saw Maryland really grow up in front of your eyes. A lot of underclassmen who are kind of stepping up and into these rotational roles or starting roles, whether it's in the front seven, in the secondary. So this is truly a momentum building performance.
Yeah, one of those things I want to give credit to before I forget in the growth of someone. I was happy to see, like I said last week, I was mad there seemed to be zero accountability that Wislowski was still returning punts at the end of that game. Clearly that changed. They had Ty Felton back there. Immediately Fred texted me when he saw Ty back there and was like, I swear to God, if they demis Felton's career with his punt returns, I'm going to lose it. But what I like to see was that first unbelievable punt return, which only Felton have the guts to do, picking up a bouncing ball between 4 USC players and taking it, I don't know, 15 to 18 yards upfield with just the golden hands that never drop balls. The very first person to run over and congratulate him was Wazlowski, and I thought that showed a lot. And you could very easily be bitter that your job was replaced by this dude, but you ran over and made a point that, like, hell of a play, bro. I mean, you're still on the field, you're still doing your job and being a great teammate. I expect that Wazlowski will grow and be an amazing punt return and kick return for us again in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just banged up and doesn't have it right now. Maybe he'll be the end of the season, he'll be back there. But really cool to see that growth mindset just right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, he's a big, he's a big team player. He does a good job, just doing all the little things right and being a good, just being a good guy in the locker room too. That there's merit in that for sure. But obviously, during the bye week, Loxley, I think he talked about it in one of the press conferences, but just kind of a need to kind of create the plays and create the ability to generate some explosive plays. The week before. They had a couple others. Shamar McIntosh, he was back there returning punts as well. Trying to see what else can work. And you talked about that Ty Felton return. I mean, Maryland was going to be inside. I believe it was at the Maryland 11-yard line, and kind of faked out the USC players right there. And I think it was 17-yard return there to kind of get Maryland some better field position. So just kind of need some of that explosiveness. But I think a lot of fans kind of noted the big the emotional commentary, especially in the second half comeback there. When you look back at it, that same announcer was on the call last year for the Virginia game, calling the Braden Wazowski kick return in the Virginia game. So, I think Braden Wazowski, he has that big playability, has that potential. I think it's just kind of being able to get back on track. And, a guy like Felton, he's obviously been able to showcase he has that big playability. I mean, week one, he had that 5-6 yard catch and turned it into 75 yards. So I think it's just kind of about finding some of those explosive plays, generating the explosive plays, and helping Maryland win the field position battle as Bryce McPherson takes care of the other side of it.
Yeah, the other big thing this week that I wanted to talk about was the post-game interview with Loxley. Was, I think, the best of his career. I literally downloaded it and was like clipping it up before recording so we could like play clips and talk about him. And then I'm like, it's the whole thing. I'm just not even going to do it. Like, any of you listening to this podcast needs, if you haven't already, go listen to Loxley's post-game presser. One of the things they asked him was about the fans leaving at halftime. And he gave a very honest answer that, I might have left too because of all the terrible things that went right before half. It was maybe the worst 2 minutes of Maryland football I've ever seen. We had 1 minute and 45 seconds left. Ruben misses an easy interception. Then we get a 3 and out. Then where there's bad punt coverage with a personal foul that gets USC into scoring range, and they score 7. 1 minute on a 1 minute drive, and then we get into a field goal range, and instead of clocking it like 99% of the time you do in that situation, you line up for a play and a bad snap goes over your head, you get no points out of it on another turnover. It was literally an insane 2 minute drive, and we started off the second half with a turnover on downs, so really it wasn't much better on the other end. So those middle 8 he likes to talk about went real poorly. Thank God the rest went pretty well.
Yeah, it's at the middle 8. A couple people I think in the game thread noted, why didn't Edwards clock it, and it did look like I saw Loxley. I think it was Ron Zook. He looked right at Lox, and they both started signaling. And there was no gray area. Like the entire time, you could see Lox saying "spike it, spike it, spike it." So I was kind of surprised how that happened the way it did. And yeah, I mean, you could just see Lox visibly frustrated on the sideline.
Okay.
Right when that ball was rushed.
So that might have been one of 2 Billy awful mistakes in this
game. I think the snap might not have been. Might have been also just a little too high for Billy. So I think it was just kind of counter. But yeah, I think based on Loxley's reaction, it was pretty clear that
wasn't a coaching decision.
They wanted to snap it. He wasn't asked about it post game, but no, I don't think he was. But we can talk to him about it on Tuesday. But obviously, I think that was for that to happen. Maryland's kind of had some of these miscues in the last 2 minutes. Maryland in that situation, having a timeout, Maryland also called a timeout, coming out of the 2-minute warning. That could have been another situation where you
Yeah, it was
hold on to
weird.
that timeout and you use that with 10 seconds left, kind of regroup, potentially get 3 there. But, in the end, it ended with the first field storm in what, 17, 18 years?
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely participated in both of them.
I was there
um,
too. I was there.
my my daughters, yeah. Honestly, we'll just jump to the field storm again before we get a little bit more back into the game. But they started storming the field, and I just looked at my dad and I was like, no, not versus a 3-3 team, no. And he's like, bro, that was a big game. That was a big comeback. It was, and like kind of encouraged it. And so like as I was going on, I was like, I've always wanted to like get one more out of the way so I can sit back and be the old guy and whatever. And I've accomplished one with my daughters. And so I just slowly got on the field and stayed on the outside edges with the girls and enjoyed the moment. And the girls thought it was the coolest thing in the world. They had clearly never seen it before because they're not 17 years old. But yeah, this feels like it used to be a regular thing around here. There used to be
Yeah.
a every other season type situation, and it's been a long time coming. It was an absolutely huge win. This is a much better team than their record. Shout out another podcast. Listen to SVP Pod. It's minute 41 if you don't want to listen to the whole thing. Scott Van Pelt goes in a whole diatribe about how the USC record is not who they are and how the USC, faithful are just losing their mind and about all his feelings going through the game. And he's just one of us, every one of us that thought that, we were going to lose the whole time, and then you get the excitement, and then you think immediately we scored too soon, and we're still going to give up the field goal because this is this like
Yeah.
beaten into us. It's what's happened. It doesn't go our way. And the real question that he asked all of you is, where are you going? Where are you going at halftime? I get it. I was part of the problem last week, and I almost refused this week. I was like, I don't know what they're going to have to do to get me out of this game early because I don't think I've ever left early 2 games in a row. It's only like one every 3 seasons that I leave early. But I did go into that game so depressed, I was worried about that fact. Thankfully, that ended completely different.
Yeah, and I think I actually I think in the game, and I get it. I think this time was kind of different. I think obviously I think I'll always support the field storm. That's what makes college athletics great. That's what separates it from even in the NIL and portal era. It's what always will make it better, or not better, different than pro sports. The NFL, you're not going to see that stuff. And that's just I really think in the moment, you it's you're just really thinking the last couple of weeks, really since the Michigan State game, it kind of felt like, it's been, a lot of fans, it's kind of hard to, maintain, some positive momentum, hard to, stay positive and kind of look at, half glass full there. I think it's just really, again, pulling it out in the fourth quarter, the comeback, the fact that it's homecoming. It's just an atmosphere. It's an emotional thing. And I remember, and I so sorry, trigger warning for those that basketball fans. But I remember, I think it was the 2012 season. It was Turgeon's, I think, third season. The first ranked win was against NC State, and they were like 17, 18. And I was at the game. It was over a winter break. I think it was my junior year. And I mean, I graduated from Maryland. I think I've said this before, but I never saw Maryland in a bowl game. I never saw Maryland in NCAA tournament game. So I mean, that was the
It's a
first
rough
time.
4 years, man. I
Oh,
apologize.
yeah, it's truly wild that I graduated through that stretch. But yeah, I think just kind of being there and just kind of the atmosphere of it. There was no doubt in my. I mean, I remember going back home that night and watching the replay of it, and you could just like at one point the ESPN cuts to the student section, and all you can see is just me just running onto the court, and I'm like, yeah, just like looking like an absolute loser. But there was no doubt in my mind that all of us in the section, me included, were going to go onto the court. And I remember after the game, everyone's like, "Oh, they're number 17 in the country. We're better than that. This is Maryland. We have a national championship. We don't storm the court." And it's like, if I was like anyone there in the moment, that like there was no debate. So I say that to say, um, being at the game and watching a game are two different things. And if you
Two
are at
different
the game,
things.
being
You
at the
feel the
game,
momentum.
exactly, you're it's like all part of it. So in that moment, you're just celebrating. Yeah,
Yep.
I saw some of the alums in the nosebleeds making fun of Maryland fans storming the field. But you know what,
Bro,
man?
honestly, it was the most interesting. This is my fourth one, and it was the most interesting one because it was the title of the show, a field sprinkle, and because it was only the diehards that have literally. Like, if you're there right then, you have bled with this team. You have suffered
Yeah.
through these years and gotten to this point where you're like, you know what, this is good enough. This is a good enough excuse. This has turned away from I thought I was never gonna walk in this stadium again to I feel all those feelings they used to give me, and that's why you rush on the field. Again, I was hesitant as hell because I knew that they were a 3-3 squad. But they're much better than a 3-3 squad. They're also USC, and you can always go with the fun fact now that the Terps have never lost to the USC Trojans, and that's just a fun thing to say. And I hope we get to say it forever. And honestly, if nothing else, we kept saying we were looking for a rival in the Big Ten. What if we can keep this series at 50-50? What if we can win half the games versus USC? That's a hell of a rivalry to build because they don't have anybody here either. So it'd be a little bit of fun. So let's just look forward. It'd be pretty cool to have a West Coast, East Coast rivalry.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool. But I'll tell you what, there's something in me that kind of views Indiana as this like rival.
Yeah, I don't like them.
But honestly, I mean, you look at football. I mean, football. They've been competitive with Maryland almost every year. There's been a lot of good games. Those first couple of years in the Big Ten, those were some real exciting games. And basketball, obviously, there's the history there. They're good games. But I don't know. There's something about Indiana. I don't really like them.
Yeah.
But so I think they're you kind of have that. But obviously, I think USC. Fans kind of ask, hey, what's kind of the benefit of the Big Ten expanding when you're able to, beat USC and next year they'll travel to UCLA, being able to expand their brand. Maryland, they've, recruiting wise, they've tried to do so as well. It looked like they'd have a chance with that 4-star linebacker, Marco Jones, at one point, kind of in the mix for an official visit. But again, that's kind of what I kind of see the upside is being. And if you can keep the series competitive, that's exactly how you build these rivalries.
And this game brings a lot of what Talia has brought the last few years. Get your game in front of a few more Samoan eyes and see if we can get a couple more big linebackers and linemen off that island. Let's go.
get the next Ami Finau, Masai Nasilikite, Jahari Branch, all
those guys.
Just lumping all the indie guys together. But yeah, the big boys can never hurt.
Yeah. The only last negative thing I want to talk about, just there were some strange coaching decisions that I just didn't love. I did not understand 14-21 passing up on a chip shot field goal and going for it on fourth down from the 4-yard line. I didn't understand even more when you were throwing the ball, because at least if you run the ball, you've at least pinned them on the 1-2 yard line and you can go for a safety. And then it ends up being one of the 2 bad Billy plays. Let's give Billy some credit. He had 2 absolutely unbelievable plays. The very first throw of the game was a Patrick Mahomes sidearm to prevent a sack. And on the very last drive, he passed a shovel pass that I've never seen go that far. I think it was a 15-yard shovel pass because he had tucked to run and then saw Felton wide open and somehow managed to throw a shovel pass 15 yards for basically the score. He'd stopped on like the 3-yard line before he got to run it in a couple plays later.
Yeah.
But those 2 were unbelievable. But, he did have a couple mistakes. So I didn't like the no field goal, and I also didn't understand going for it on 4th and 7 with 3 minutes left and 3 timeouts. That also seemed weird. It just seemed like we were just like playing Madden. We're just going to score touchdowns and nothing else matters. I don't know. Obviously it worked. I can't question it because it worked, but it just seems strange. And all of those things added up to being the like, oh, I'm disappointed. Oh, I'm excited. Oh, I'm disappointed. Oh, I'm excited. That made that game so great. Like, we had to make those weird decisions.
Yeah, I think. So I do understand that perspective about the 4th and goal at the USC 4, and then obviously led to that Billy interception. Really worst case scenario there, because I kind of looked at
absolute worst case, yeah.
And I kind of viewed it as the defense was playing well at that point. The offense kind of had some momentum. Yeah, I say worst case scenario, you don't get it and you pin USC back. But no, the USC interception obviously
it was that 5% chance of like a interception for touchdown, or an interception. Those 2 things are like 5% chance. The incomplete pass leaves them on the 4. You're not as mad. The the running the ball leaves them either a first down or short and pins them deep. But yeah, it was worst case scenario. There were two open wide receivers on that,
Yeah,
and
it was a little
I
tough.
think it was just like an anxious moment. He underthrew the heck out of the ball, just like tried to lob it up to a big receiver when
Yeah.
he had another 10 yards to run. He could have just sprinted to the corner. But you know,
And
you're gonna make 50 passes, you're gonna have a couple mistakes.
yeah, exactly. And Loxley said in post game, he probably Edwards probably threw it a little bit more than he would have liked. But you did mention the fourth and seven late. I don't know if I'm as critical of that one, just because there was about three minutes left, and sure,
Yep.
you had three timeouts, which ended up looming large on that next possession there. But I would have understood that a little bit more. I thought the fourth and two decisions on the opening drive of the second half. That was a little bit out of maybe out of Jack Howell's range. He's I think over three this year on field goals, either over three or over four. But has not made a field goal beyond 50 yards this year. So I kind of understand the decision not to go for a field goal, but I kind of thought that was a little bit of a bold call. And that was the first fourth down attempt that did not get converted. So that was a little bit of a momentum swing there, but it wasn't too critical of the last play.
Yeah, going for fourth down early in the game, I was less critical of. I probably should be more critical of it because I think that they were making those decisions based on letting the outside noise, us and all the other people that have been negative on this team, influence the thing of like, we're going to go for it here. We're going to show them we're an offensive powerhouse and not be scared of USC. So I do think, even though they said we're keeping it in house and all this stuff, like in reality, it seems different than past games. We're as guilty of it as they are, so I've got to give them the pass. There was a lot of negativity around this team. There can very easily be negativity around this team again if you start losing again. I don't think this one game fixed anything, but let's hope it turned the tides.
It gets momentum. It gets it's sometimes just also just about the winning feeling again.
Yep.
There's some weight behind that.
100%.
There's a lot of people, in this program, just a lot of, tunnel vision, just keep your head down and get focused. But so, guys like Billy Edwards, that's, even watching post game, I think he was coming off the field and talking with Makai Rowland. It's not every day you see QB1 talking with, just having a normal conversation with, your freshman corner. And Loxley talked about it, before the season, just kind of him being, just friends with everybody, kind of personable, such a personable guy, easy, guys just really find themselves gravitating towards him. But again, guys like him really keeping the locker room together, keeping everyone kind of focused on the main goal. So I think just being able to get back in the win column. But I think that blocked field goal as well. Can't talk about the game without bringing that one up. I think that was great play, and I think part of the benefit or the downside of watching a game or being at the game is you don't always hear the call. And I thought the call on that from the announcers was all time. So that was fun to hear back. But I think obviously just getting back in the win column was much needed for Maryland.
Yeah, part of that blocked field goal that went kind of unnoticed. One of the three things I got noted here is just a shout out to my unsung hero, my front runner for my possibly favorite player next year. Like, please don't leave. Wheatland had one hell of a game and absolutely unsung hero in a few moments. One of them being he recovered that fumble after the return field goal, the field goal return. He covered up that field goal block. Then he also was the one that stopped the final fourth down play where they were converting. It just kind of unbelievably big moments. And he was able, So let's see. Final third down was back pushing, covered the fumble, and blocked field goal return. And he made the game-ending pass breakup, along with a million other moments in that game where he was all over the field, but really shining.
And that pass breakup, I mean, that would have been about, the 30, 35-yard line. So that would have pushed USC right on
into
the edge
field
of
goal
field goal
range
territory.
Yep.
Yeah, man, he's a stud. When you watch him, there's, I think this linebackers, I mean, even the future guys, CJ Smith is another guy. He looks really, really good his senior season. So, but even when you watch him in high school, his speed for an athletic for a linebacker, his athleticism is definitely impressive. That sideline to sideline range, great frame, and super reliable tackler in the open field there. And think it's perfect example why he and Ruben Hippolyte are the starting linebackers, and definitely a guy I expect to be one of those leaders on defense next year.
That's great. That's great to hear. Obviously, great games by Prather, great games by Felton, but we can't go without talking about deeply the Octavian Smith. We've talked in the past that he had to make some soul searching about hanging around this team or going and finding his own way, and that was a coming out party and a half. I hope we can see a little bit more of this the rest of the season.
Yeah, obviously, and Caden Prather as well. Shout out to him. 9 catches, 111 yards. Both those career highs. That's surprisingly his first career 100-yard game as a
It is
Terp.
surprising.
So that's definitely. I think a lot of fans kind of recognize his big playability, his vertical threat, and being able to really take the top off defenses. So shout out to him to really being able to build off that. But like you mentioned, Octavian Smith, he was a guy. In the spring. Maryland was talking about, Shalik Knott's really being able to potentially stepping up in that third wide receiver role, as Maryland has kind of been looking for that third guy to really complement Caden Prather and Ty Felton on the outside. Then in fall camp, Octavian Smith sounded like he was starting to really put things together, and he's kind of been able to build on it ever since. He talked about it post game, but he's been battling a turf toe, and for a speed guy that that does kind of hinder you a little bit. You mentioned you're finally healthy now. But finishing with a career high 8 catches on for 84 yards on 9 targets. Thought he did a really good job. That touchdown. I said it again, but
Ridiculous catch.
Ridiculous catch. The best part was I didn't realize until after the game was the DB recognizing or thinking that he broke up the pass.
Oh yeah, he was celebrating. He was no. Actually, yes.
Yeah, so that was pretty funny. But also a very similar play to the NC State touchdown back in 2022. Almost identical play designs there. But yeah, I think coming out party for Octavian Smith. I think this tight end room. Still I kind of view it as 1A 1B between Preston Howard, Dylan Wade. Preston Howard kind of being maybe a little more that vocal leader for that room. But kind of getting that third skill player. Defenses are starting to dial in Ty Felton. He still had a hell of a game as well. 9 catches as well. So Todd Caden Prather for team high there. I think it's just big for this offense to continue to find other options and continue to show that Maryland skill players can be a threat anytime they have the ball in their hands.
Yeah, that catch by Octavian Smith should be the best play in most games. I unfortunately do think it was overshadowed by USC's second touchdown. That one-handed grab was dirty.
Yeah, that was. Sometimes
you can't do anything about that. Yeah,
that was
certainly one of the times where the other team scores and I'm just smiling and shaking my head. It's like, what are you gonna do?
I don't know. I think it was Perry Fisher in coverage there. I don't know what more he could have done on that.
Filthy.
But, that was beautiful. I said game recognized game on that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that's all I got on USC. You got anything else?
No, obviously, like we said, I think just a big win, and I think we're kind of both on the same page. Let the kids be kids, let the fans be fans on the field storm. So as Loxley said post game, and as I noted in the takeaway article following the game, it's time for Maryland to build on it. And only 2 wins away from bowl eligibility will be interesting. Rest of the slate, top 5 opponents on the road. So, but for this week, Maryland did what it needed to do.
Yeah, I got a lot of heat on social media this week, and there might even after this podcast, I don't know, for being like the old guy on the field and act like I'm like living in old school, getting drunk and hanging out at frat parties. Like that's not the world. Like there are different schools. Every school has its own culture. This field rush was like over half middle-aged people because it was homecoming, and those are the ones that like I came to one game this year. I'm not leaving early, so like 80% of the stands were all the like post grads and fans that have been here for 15 and 20 years. Like those were the people left. So as you see a couple hundred students go on the field, you're like, looks like they need some help. like this looks pathetic.
Just doing it for moral support.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a great time. The players seem to love it, so I don't really give a shit that people on social media hate it. Like my daughters absolutely loved it. I'm not there, drinking in Cornerstone and act like a fool. I'm just living my best life, trying to get the wins in life where you can. So I support anybody else out there. I know Dewey's a big listener. I saw him out in the field rush with one of the coolest jackets out there.
I saw him in one of the Maryland postgame videos too.
Yeah. He had like this like sweet shelled jacket. I got to get my hands on one of those. Very, very cool. But that game moves behind us. We are now on the road in the Big Ten. we have now figured out kind of how to beat a Big Ten team at home. Personally, I think we're just still undefeated versus non-Big Ten teams since USC hasn't established themselves. But we're going on the road to the Big Ten. How do we keep this momentum going?
Yeah, obviously, Minnesota's coming off their bye week, so an extra week of rest, and playing at home, that's will be
They
a
don't have
hurdle
like a
for
locks
Maryland.
curse where they can't win coming off the bye, right? Like they don't have one of
Uh,
those.
not that I'm aware of, but
Oh, that's
but
unfortunate.
we'll see. I think Saturday will be an interesting game. I think offensively for Minnesota, they've still really trying to figure out their identity, and Max Brosmer not doing completing 68% of his passes, just a hair under Bailey Edwards, 70% right there, 6 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Daniel Jackson proven to be their most explosive player among the conference leaders. I think he sits fifth or sixth in the conference. 42 catches, 451 yards for 1 touchdown. But they do struggle to move the ball. But on the flip side, this Minnesota defense, they do a really good job of limiting offenses, and a big reason why the Gophers were able to really come back in that second half against USC there. The second fewest yards per game, second fewest passing yards per game as well. They lead the Big Ten in interceptions, second in the FBS, 13. And freshman defensive back Coy Parrish is coming off a defensive player of the week after recording a pair of interceptions in the road win at UCLA 2 weeks ago, 21-17 there. So I think this will be interesting. Obviously for Maryland, Minnesota's just I think their turnover margins +8. I think Maryland is +7 or +6 now. So just right next to each other there. And I think both these teams do a good job of obviously taking care of the football. But for this Maryland offense, it's really you've got to figure out a way to kind of win the trenches there. I mean, it's kind of been one of the points really week in, week out for Maryland to really be able to move the needle in Big Ten play. But obviously, I think being able to coming off a game where Octavian Smith has kind of been able to showcase himself. And Shalik Knotts, he's had flashes at times in the first month of the season. I believe it was the Villanova game where he had the 2 catches, or Indiana game where he had the 2 catches along the right sideline there. So Maryland skill players will definitely need to come up big and find ways to get Nolan Ray in space as well, as he's coming off a good game, averaging I believe 6 yards per carry.
Yeah, well, we need it's like a shell and tell revenge game. That was one of the best trips I've ever had. That was an absolute embarrassment when we went out there in Minnesota. We got destroyed by Bateman and the giant lineman that's on the Ravens now.
Daniel Falele.
Yeah, Falele.
Yeah.
They were both on that squad, and was the one year that Minnesota popped up and was great. They thought it was the PJ Fleck coming out party. Turns out, he's okay. I think he's a really unlikable kind of guy. It's probably my least liked outside of University of South Carolina down there. If they want to strap him up, it would be really fun. Let's do that. But yeah, we need a shell and tell revenge game. That's hanging large in my head. I hope it works. I hope we get this win out of the way now. Because I really don't want it to come down to we need both Iowa and Rutgers. It would be nice to just be sitting there on the cusp of we just need one. Just give me one and get back to bowl season and keep this thing rolling. Obviously, Locks in the recruitment world is doing well, as we'll talk even 2 new recruits today. We need to keep this thing going, and that was a huge step last week, but you need more.
Yeah, I think obviously that's completely fair. The home team has won each of the last 4 matchups, but the last road team to win was actually Maryland back in 2018. 2017, pulling out the 31-24 win. I believe it was Ty Johnson who had a 34-yard game-winning touchdown there with about a minute, 2 minutes left. We'll see if Maryland's kind of able to reverse course this weekend. But Minnesota's, they've proven to be a tough out at home.
It's a loud stadium. It's usually pretty full. They don't seem to know who they are. They mix up their chants with the Gopher chants and the Vikings chants, and it's all kind of a hot mess. They're rowing a boat, but they're Gophers, but they're Skull. It's a very confusing thing, but they're the nicest people I've ever met. Everyone thanked us for coming. Welcome to Minnesota. Thanks for coming was burned into my brain for a good 6 months after that trip. I think everyone, including every kindergartner I saw, told us that, and they're very hospitable. I hope that leads to a win.
There you go.
Maryland, I think Maryland might have found this secret weapon with Octavian Smith. So what we saw this week was our tight ends backed off a lot. There were a couple Dylan Wade plays, but really nothing outside of Dylan Wade, and he took a big step back. But if we can have an Octavian Smith or tight end game each week, that gives us enough options across the field to really be able to have threats everywhere.
Yeah, obviously, I think you're right there. Getting Maryland, that third option there with Octavian Smith. Obviously, Caden Prather has been able to showcase that big playability, and Ty Felton, he's been able to do Ty Felton things. Yeah, just makes Maryland's offense more dynamic. Opens up the run game as well, which has been a struggle. Maryland's kind of had some opportunities, some flashes where they've been able to run the ball, but I think especially on the road, Maryland's going to be able to figure out some way to be able to run the ball, even though the offensive line is continue to be a work in progress as offensive line or yeah. Obviously with Maryland being able to create more efficiency on the offensive side of the ball, I think kind of being able to build off what they did against USC, I think is kind of the big thing.
Yeah, I did see some improvement pretty much across the field with the running backs. Hemby, I think, had one of his better games in a long time. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Nolan Ray. I continue to see big things out of him. Clearly, the future of the backfield. McDonald unfortunately got banged up pretty early, so wasn't able to see a lot of Colby. But I'm sure he would have done good things if available. He's always the hammer. He's like the most reliable of the three. We know what's happening on his place.
Yeah, obviously, I think he's kind of the unsung hero, the guy that probably gets the least amount of credit and most deserving of it in the room there. Whenever he gets touches, he's proven to be efficient. But Nolan Ray thought he flashed as well. I believe it was a 33-yard run to get Maryland in the red zone there against USC this weekend. So got to get more of the same this weekend.
Yeah, best work I've seen from Nolan Ray, like in a box, just like the short yardage middle things. Like all year, I've kind of been like, why are we running him up the middle? Oh, well, he kind of showed this week he could actually do it a little bit. So, I mean, I guess it's all development. Locks knows more football than I do, of course. I know that, but as a fan, you freak out. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? But it's all good. We're back. We need a few more wins. Hopefully, this wasn't a flash in the pan, but I think we can do it. And this win in front of a stacked house of recruits, like you talked about earlier, has paid dividends. Why don't we talk about the two recruits we got today, Ahmed?
Yeah, right before the show, Saya and Elijah Hammond, twins out of Calvert Hall. Long way in the making. It looked like it was going to happen, frankly, right after their official visit. Kind of, got put on hold a little bit and kind of went through the fall. And Maryland was still, involved there. Brian Williams sounded like he was more involved with Saya. Damian Robolowski and James Thomas working with Elijah. Elijah there, Zach Babatol as well with him being kind of position coach. And speaking about position, Elijah, he plays a lot more of that outside linebacker role where he's a lot more inside the box. Really good in run support, good tackler in the open field as well. It sounds like he'll play more of a safety role at Maryland where kind of similar to that Glenn Miller type role. Again, kind of being able to do some more of the same what he does at Calvert Hall. And then with Asaya, I think, he was really intriguing target, 6'8" lineman who has potential to play offense and defense on the defensive side of the ball. That size at 6'8", being able to eat up space as a interior defensive lineman, defensive tackle, I think was really appealing. Wouldn't rule out the offensive side of the ball either. He lines up as a left tackle for Calvert Hall. And then again, that 6'8" frame is, where a lot of coaches, they kind of salivate at that size along the offensive line, and I think that's kind of when you look at Maryland's offensive line room or offensive tackles currently, you don't really have a lot of that. You have Ben Bamer, who's already committed right now out of Lakeland down in Florida. So he'll get there in January. So those are two kind of body types in that tackle room where you kind of have some size that you don't really have right now. I think Elijah. I think he'll be, like I said. I think he'll be able to make his impact felt against the run. Asaya, I think he's a guy. You can't teach that size and kind of being able to rework a little bit of that frame and get a little bit lighter on his feet, maintain that mobility, that athleticism, and being able to probably add another 25, 30 pounds once he reworks that frame. But both those guys are expected to get there next June alongside JT Taggart because Calvert Hall in a season where it seems like all these conferences and all these schools are reversing some very long rules on allowing kids to enroll early at their school of choosing now. Really, really interesting change over these last couple of months, but unfortunately, Calvert Hall does not allow it yet. So they will both be on campus in next June of 2025. But nonetheless, 22nd, 23rd commitments for Maryland this cycle. I think that they're the exact type of guys that Maryland should really be building the core of their class around.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, anytime you get local guys, anytime you can get dudes with, highly rated, get more into these local schools that are entrenched. It is strange that, there seems to be, a mix of rules in college and mixed rules in high school. It's a weird time in college athletics altogether. It's just hard to keep track of.
High school was weird. I mean, like good counsel. I mean, you don't really hear a lot about, good counsel being able to do that. WCAC historically does not. And, Fahim Delaney, I heard, there was probably a good chance that they were going to lose him this for this season had they not been able to figure out how to get him early enrolled. Spalding, that was, Malik Washington, looked like Jaden Ships was going to be able to, or was at least, kind of eyeing that pretty hard, but he'll enroll next June. Delmar White will also enroll next June as well because he's got wrestling. But Malik Washington, he's getting there in January. That's a huge development. I mean, that's honestly as big as him committing to Maryland, getting there 6 months early, where he's putting together a really strong senior season. Really just aids the development. Then you look at some other WCAC schools that do not allow the early enrollees yet. There's a good chance that they end up losing some of their marquee guys the next couple of years. So all kinds of rule changes, but this time it benefits Maryland.
Yeah, finally it benefits Maryland. It's been many years it hasn't. It definitely makes these guys coming in, makes the spring game a lot more fun. Let's get some eyes on some guys early that you'd been hearing about, having to wait a whole season to see them. You kind of fall into the background if they're not being productive members of the team. So it's good when you're following, inside the black and gold and Ahmed and reading all these articles to be able to see these dudes right in front of your face. I hope we get great weather for the spring game again, like we did last year. It's a lot of fun. Well, I guess it rained in the second half, but the first half was pretty great.
Yeah, it was good. But before bowl or before spring game, let's find a way to get 6 and get that bowl game.
Yeah, let's definitely do that. We can take it a long way this week. It'd be great to have 5 and just looking forward, and just any game. Just like at that point, you're just like, no hope is ever lost till the final whistle. I mean, I know it's Penn State at the end, and it seems very unlikely, but we've done it before. So you get to 5, and you can just hold out hope till the end, and that's the biggest step, is getting this 5th game under our belt as early as possible. Hopefully this Saturday in the great state of Minnesota, where they are so welcoming that they're just going to hand us a win, and that's my hope. All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming back after the most depressing podcast ever last week. I hope this one was a little bit better for you. I actually, as I was leaving the game, I was in the dark, in my normal clothes, none of the big hat stuff, nothing, because again, I was kind of like not even sure where I was in the moment, headed to that game. And somebody ran up to me and was like, "Hey, I really love your podcast with Ahmed." And I was just, got to talk to him a little bit. But it is really crazy that, still, I've met many of you, and still to this day, I'm meeting more fans. So very cool. We're still out there. We're still fighting the good fight. We're still following this team that both gives us great times and gives us heartbreak. But that's the whole point, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's actually had a couple similar moments. I had about 5 or 6 people these first couple of weeks of the season stop me and talk about the show, talk about the site. So looking forward to meeting more of you these last 2 home games.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, until next time, here's to wishing all is well under the show.